See where it takes us. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Welcome to the Sporting Mavericks podcast, which I have tentatively titled Prince, Pirate, Peach, after some nicknames of people we'll talk about in later episodes. So, I'm Philip Malcolm. I write about sports.
And I'm Paul Keegan, and I write about phonics.
What a combination. Because I always think there just aren't enough podcasts in the world, particularly not by middle-class white guys, I think.
Yeah.
The world.
Do you know a friend of mine, about 7 or 8 years ago, came up with the term podcast as a collective noun for middle-aged, middle-class white men.
Ah, that's like Top Man Indie.
Yeah,
that's good.
A podcast of white men.
So, in that spirit, as we discussed before we decided to record this, we wanted to do a segment where two middle-aged, middle-class white guys complain about shit for 3 minutes. So, Paul, what's grinding your gears?
What's grinding my gears? Okay, so I think
jet lag is a wonderful thing, Phil. And about 4 o'clock this morning, I was remembering some magnificent hot dogs I'd eaten.
The day before yesterday at Jim's Texas Hots. This is not a plug, on Market Street in Corning, New York.
But if they want to give you some free hot dogs as a result.
Seriously, if
by some miracle they hear this and want to shoot me a few free hot dogs, please do. Jim, if you are in fact still with us. Now Jim's place it's the kind of place, you know, when you go in there and you think this place hasn't changed since like 1975. It's still got like an oldie worldy New York Yankees sign on the wall.
The decor hasn't changed
since the 70s. The decor hasn't changed since the 70s. And I was eating these two, you know, New York classic hot dogs, sauerkraut, mustard, strawberry milkshake. It's something I do every single time I come to visit my wife's family in Corning, New York. And I found myself thinking about the sort of 5 or 6 hot dogs past that I've had. And I was looking back through the photos of these hot dogs that I'd sent to my friend Richard, who's another hot dog enthusiast. And I was thinking to myself, like, we're kind of moving away from that tradition of, you know, soft white bun, boiled hot dog. And
you're not a fan of the artisan hot dog.
That's it. The artisan hot dog
started to grind me gears. And I started thinking about, like, the gimmicks that they're adding to hot dogs nowadays. Like they'll call it something like the Mayan because it's got avocado on it. And it's like a homemade toasted brioche bun with slaw.
Yeah. No,
it just grinds me gears.
And eyelashes.
Yes, that's it. It grinds me gears.
Artisan hot dogs are grinding me gears. I feel like we're moving away from a world in which a soft white bun with a boiled hot dog, sauerkraut, and mustard is enough.
That's what's grinding my gears.
What about you?
Keegan, a man out of time.
Who'd have thought I'd become anachronistic in my 40s? Who'd have thought it, Phil?
Even more niche than that, because I was thinking today, like, what's the thing that's caused me the most angst this week? And it was legitimately, again, right back Matisse Sanwasa.
Okay.
So normally when I go to football, I speak Dutch to the people I go with, Except sometimes when I get pissed off, I slip into proper Northern English dialect vitriol. And this kid, if he wasn't from the city, he wouldn't be playing for him, He defo wouldn't be first choice. Because the only thing he's got is a decent first touch. I've never seen him beat a man. I've seen him... His centre-back likes to bring the ball out of defence, and he stands there on the halfway line and waits. And then when he loses the ball way up the pitch, he just starts walking back.
Oh, that would wind me up.
Yeah, so...
You lose a ball. Yeah. So, you lose a ball, you'll do anything to get it back.
He's 21 years old as well, you know? He's ambitious. He wants to be playing in the Premier League in 3 years, he said. So, not like that you won't, pal. So, yeah.
Pull your socks up then.
I gave him a piece of my mind yesterday, and two children turned around absolutely horrified.
Oh, nice.
Would you like to share what piece of your mind, what particular piece of your mind you gave him, or is this a family friendly?
I may have called him a lazy little prick at high volume.
Fair enough.
Twice.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Anyway, so Sporting Mavericks.
Yes.
Our first ever episode, Mr. Keegan, is about Marco Pantani. Cue the slides. It's okay.
Right.
You don't need to cue the slides. I can add the slides later. As long as you've got the slides in front of you, I'll tell you. I do have the slides.
Just opening them.
We'll do it in post. So, slide number 2 is Mr. Marco Pantani. What do you know about Marco Pantani already?
Other than a kind of brief conversation I had with my father about a year ago, he had some kind of piratical nickname. Was he the pirate?
He was the pirate. He's the titular pirate of this podcast, yeah.
Yeah.
He was a cyclist.
You can probably glean that from the picture.
Yes. And I gleaned that he was most likely Italian
from his name. but other than that, I kind of resisted the temptation to learn any more about him. I just kind of, I want to react. I want to react to this story, a story that I don't already know.
Right. So, for a brief period in the 1990s of about 3.5 years, Marco Pantani was like the most exciting guy in cycling. So before Lance Armstrong came along, and after Miguel Indurain, who we'll talk about later, this guy was the shit. Like, nobody was like him. He was this little, skinny, tiny, mardy Italian fella who was given to weird metaphysical quotes in interviews. He was the best climber ever. But the story is a little more complicated than that, of course, because as you might already know, he's dead. He died in 2004 of a cocaine overdose. So we're going to take you on a roller coaster ride through Marco Pantani's life, but also the Italy that made Marco Pantani. So there's a really cool Steve Friedman, an American journalist, wrote a feature on him shortly after he died and summed him up as a cheater, an innocent victim, sensitive and cruel, loving and arrogant, a villain and a hero. He saved the Tour de France. He brought shame on cycling. He inspired others. He destroyed lives.
And that is one hell of a quote.
That's a pretty good CV. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
I actually am having a flashback now, Phil. We've known each other for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
Now,
I remember.
Now, I didn't put these two together, but because I didn't know he was dead. But
I remember a conversation that
you and I had.
It must have been in the days after he died.
That was Valentine's Day 2004, not to skip ahead too far.
And I remember asking how he died.
And you saying to me a cocaine overdose.
Yeah.
And how we talked about how...
I don't think I've ever heard of anybody dying from a cocaine overdose.
Well, we're gonna
heroin overdose, you know, etc., etc., etc.
But we're gonna get to that. This is a long-term issue. This isn't like he woke up one morning, took a load of cocaine, and died. But we're not gonna start there. That's where we're gonna finish.
Okay.
But,
okay. Yeah,
right. So first of all, I'm just gonna tell you where I got all the stuff. All the research from this to acknowledge my sources. A book by a guy called Matt Rendell called The Death of Marco Pantani, which is like the standard text on the subject. His manager, Manuela Ronchi, she wrote a book called Man on the Run, which is an interesting semi-fictional account of it. The Steve Friedman article I mentioned there, Pro Cycling Stats, which is a website which is like the archive of professional cycling, which is cool. John Foote wrote a book called Pedalare, which is a history of Italian cycling. And Herbie Sykes, who wrote a book called Maglio Rosa, which is the history of the Giro d'Italia, which we'll go into first. But I'm going to start with two Italian concepts. So the first one is called, and forgive my Italian, dietrologia, which is the idea that behind what we see as a surface reality, like all kinds of dimensions and all kinds of like machinations in the background that we as ordinary citizens can't know about. Yeah. And the one that goes hand in hand with that is the familiar concept of omerta, which means those who do know about it don't talk about it.
Okay.
So the central theme through both of those is this kind of sinister menace of like there's something going on underneath the surface in everyday life which you can't understand. And it was kind of, in the end, the search for that kind of destroyed Mr. Pantani. But we're going to start our story. Next slide, please. In 1945, when Second World War has just ended and Italy is, not to put too fine a point on it, fucked.
I mean, yeah, the image of the slide couldn't have summed it up any better.
Oh, you've got some
really
you've got some light infantry from Nottingham walking through the destroyed ruins of a Renaissance city. But I'm going to quote from the Herbie Sykes book, first of all, which just set the scene of where we are in Italy in 1945. So, Italy at the end of World War II lay in ruins, her infrastructure all but obliterated, the will of her people crushed by years of human carnage and ideological bewilderment. In her cities, entire communities found themselves homeless, living in railway carriages at useless abandoned stations. In the south, those fortunate enough not to have been bombed completely out of their homes searched frantically for furniture, doors and windows amidst the wreckage of devastated towns. The country lacked gas, clean water and transportation infrastructure. 60% of Mussolini's famous trains were damaged and no more would run on time. So, yeah, Italy. Yeah, so that's like 1945, but we could go back further than that. But this is the time when like cycling in Italy assumes this almost like religious significance. So you know how the Tour de France works. You've got a 3-week race. The person with the shortest time to complete the 3 weeks, the stages over the 3 weeks, wins the race. Yeah. So a few years after the Tour de France started, Italy had its own version, which is the Giro d'Italia, which is not an exclusively Italian affair, but is huge in Italy. It emerged in the interwar years as Italy's biggest sporting event. But the 40s and 50s would set up this duel between Fausto Coppi, who won the last Giro before the war and then got conscripted, and Gino Bartali, who he won 2-3, I think, before the Second World War, but was too old for service. So Coppi is a guy who was like modern Italy. He divorced his wife like in the early 50s. He got excommunicated by the Pope. He was like this flash guy who rode around in cool cars and everything, and was like the new social forces in Italy. Bartali was a devout Catholic, Tuscan guy off a farm. And he spent the Second World War, actually, he was still training, but he was carrying messages between churches about rescuing Jews in his bike frame. So this isn't to say he was like a leftist hero or anything, but he was genuinely a decent guy. So these two become like the saints of Italian cycling.
Yeah, and such opposites too. It's kind of
like you've got the old guard, and then this kind of rock and roll cyclist.
Yeah, who spent the whole second half of the Second World War. He spent in a British POW camp in Libya. So, 1945, he gets off a boat in Naples. Fausto Coppi, this is, having sat out the second half of World War II in that POW camp, and history is somewhat unclear on how he obtained the bicycle. Negotiated to borrow a bike and then rode it 850 kilometers back to his house in Genoa is the kindest interpretation I can find of that. He blagged a bike.
Yeah.
He blagged
or stole a bike.
He blagged or stole a bike. Yeah.
Let's face it. He robbed it. Yeah.
And I shouldn't imagine his ride home was a barrel of laughs either, but you know. So yeah, before the war, like these two guys, go to the next slide because you can see a lovely picture of them there, which is like a legendary picture in cycling.
Oh.
So this is the two of them on somewhere in France, and there used to be a debate between like who's handing the bottle to who, but there's just no debate. Batali's got one on his handlebars and Coppi hasn't, so it's Coppi handing in the bottle. From Coppi's in front there, by the way. That's Fausto, and Gino Batali is behind. Yeah.
Okay.
Now this picture to me,
1950s.
You know,
it to me was it really has. It could only be more 1950s Southern European with one or both of these men were smoking in this picture.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
I kind of half expected one of them to have a cigarette.
I do have a picture of Fausto Coppi going out hunting with a shotgun over his arm and a woodbine dangling from his lips, which is it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Just cut through a different
cloth, Phil. Yeah. They really were.
So, like 1946, the Giro starts up again, right? This is like the race for a better tomorrow or something. The Giro of Renewal, it was called. So it's designed to reflect what Italy could be as well as where it was. So where it was a country with shit or no roads and a guerrilla war being fought over Trieste, where a stage was supposed to finish. So, Tito wanted it as part of Yugoslavia, and the Americans were not keen on that. It's like a clash of age, ideology, two of Italy's favourite sons. It's Italy in microcosm.
Yeah. Now, just one question. So, I
mean, I've heard of the Giro d'Italia. Now, is this still a thing? Is it still going now?
Absolutely, yeah. It's every May.
Okay.
It starts the first weekend in May. Yeah. So, yeah. This is also a society that's deeply divided on political lines after like years of fascism. Communism is a mainstream political ideology in Italy at this time, which was, of course, somewhat repressed under Mussolini. But also all those fascists who supported the old regime haven't just suddenly been converted to being nice liberals. Left-wing politics is also a threat to the supremacy of the Catholic Church, and which is where Italy's social code comes from. We already discussed that with Coppi. So this is a rivalry that's like sporting, personal, political, and regional. The rivalry between the two of them has kind of become blurred over time. It's not really polarized anymore. Coppi died in 1960 when he was still a professional cyclist, having won 5 Giro d'Italia, 2 Tour de France, countless everything else. Pantani retired in 1954, in fact, having won 2 Tours and 3 Giros.
So how old was he when he died?
Coppi?
Yeah.
I'm going to have to look that up for you. One second.
Sorry. Threw a spanner in there.
Just exposing me as a hack and a fraud is what you're doing.
No. I mean, you didn't know I was going to ask
that question, but I mean, still being a professional cyclist up until the point of your death.
40.
I mean,
that's 40.
Yeah, well, it goes without saying that's pretty rare. But
yeah, it was malaria that he contracted on a trip to somewhere in Africa hunting on holiday. He contracted malaria and died. Yeah. So this is a golden age of Italian cycling. So the real competition between the two of them was the 1946 Giro, which Pantani actually won. But this is like really the foundational myth of Italian cycling. If cycling is a religion in Italy, and it kind of is, these were the two saints. So there were others who would try and take up the mantle, like the Giro remains kind of an almost parochial affair. It's huge in Italy. It's quite a big race elsewhere, but if you think like 90% of the money in global cycling is in the Tour de France, and the Giro is the second biggest race with 5%.
All right.
Yeah.
So
you said right now, or traditionally, it was almost exclusively Italian.
Yeah. Yeah. Now it's a bit more international, but it's kind of where you go before you go to the Tour de France. Anyway, continuing the story. So Italy lacked many things at this time, but what it did have was a shitload of US Army surplus amphetamines, which are like custom made at the time for the purposes of cheating at professional cycling. It's taking the edge off grueling days, slogging through the Dolomites, giving enough energy to artificially block out the rain and cold and live to fight another day. And the timing of when to take these, they called them bombs. The timing of when to take your bomb became as much of the cyclist's skill set as knowing when to attack your rivals or knowing where a tough bend on a descent was. So alongside these products is a cadre of men known as preparatores. So these are kind of coaches, kind of pharmacists, kind of gurus, psychologists, like somewhere in the middle of that. So Coppi had this guy called Biagio Cavana, who was blind, in fact, who was like an absolute dictatorial team manager. Was also a blind physiotherapist whose influence over his riders was much speculated upon. But these guys, the concept of the Preparatores kind of goes forward, and we'll meet some of the kind of modern versions with the modern drugs as well. As a final scene setter for the sport of cycling in the post-war era, I'm just going to talk a little bit about how it was consumed by fans. So there were two ways in the old days you could experience cycling. There was the newspaper, where you could read about how it happened after the fact, and there was the radio, where you could listen to it while it was happening. Now, the thing about both of those is they're not a visual media. There's no moving pictures. So journalists tended to exaggerate how far ahead of their rivals people finished, or how far from the finish of the stage they attacked. And this kind of leads to this growth of this fucking awful thing I hate in cycling, is the warrior myth idea of epic suffering, which obviously like leads to a demand for more epic suffering, so people can eclipse the achievements of riders from the past, which obviously, the human body has a limit of potential. Or does it? Right.
Well, that one you've got a load of free speed.
I think
yeah,
there's limit to pushed a little bit. Yeah. I love the idea of
a little bit, but we'll get there as well. If you want to look at the next slide there, which is the Treaty of Rome, which was signed in 1958 by a number of European nations with the idea of making sure they never starved or had a war ever again. And it held up pretty well until 2016. Yeah. So this sparks a minor economic miracle in Italy. And there's a lot of internal migration to the north from the poor south, which leads to a lot of new building works, a lot of which is publicly funded, which in some places artificially suppresses wages. In some places they increase because they have labor that they need and have skill sets that they didn't have before. But this leads to a kind of a huge explosion in manufacturing, in particular, industrial output. So industrial output was growing between 58 and 1963 in Italy at 10% a year, only surpassed by Japan and West Germany, in the world, basically. But you still have this kind of so yeah, the next slide there is that the fruit of this labor is a Fiat 500.
Ooh,
I didn't say they were good at this. They made a lot of things, but like Zanussi, Fiat, all of those classic Italian brands that Lambretta were all making these kind of affordable goods.
Yeah. There's something really beautiful about a Fiat 500. There really is.
If you've ever been in one, there isn't. They look cool. I'll give you that.
I must have been in a 500, surely.
Surely at some point.
Maybe a new one.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, they look like they'd be difficult to sit in the back of on a long trip.
Yeah. Next slide, please. So you also still have this conflict between left and right in Italy at the time, which is you see here the bombing of Bologna train station in 1980 by a fascist, maybe supported by the CIA group. But there were a lot of bombings and murders of policemen and kidnappings and so from all these weird little hardcore communist and quasi-fascist groups, which leads to this weird kind of paranoia in Italian society about who's funding this. Is it the Soviet Union? Is it the CIA? And this is that concept I was explaining to you before about never being sure about what lies behind reality. So this is Italy. So this is a nation that's in some aspects it's nearly a failed state. In others, it's one of the leading proponents of the rapid industrialization of post-war Europe, and it's how you say, Paul? It's a land of contrasts.
Yes.
In conclusion, Italy was a land of contrasts.
Was a land of contrasts. Next slide.
Oh.
So this is where Marco Pantani was born. This is Cesenatico on the Adriatic coast of Italy, which at the time experienced a kind of tourist boom as well. So 13th of January 1970, Marco Pantani is born. His parents are Paolo, who's a plumber, and Tonina, who cleans hotel rooms in the new hotels that are springing up all across the beaches there. As a consequence, he's basically raised by his grandfather, Sotero, who's an ardent communist, but takes him hunting and things. So back in, these days, you would give this child Ritalin because he's a hyperactive child who fights with other children all the time. He climbs on everything. He's always falling off his little tricycle and falling downstairs and things. He's a nightmare. They try to get him to channel his energy into sport, and he really loves playing football. But I mean, you've seen the guy, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, he's not big enough to play football in Italy in the 1980s.
Yeah, I was going to say
Paolo Maldini. He ain't.
He ain't. Yeah.
He's a little fella.
He's a little fella, but also he's a very awkward kid as well because he starts losing his hair when he's like 13.
Yeah, waspish, would you say?
Yeah, diminutive winger on Football Manager, you would say.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've set the scene. 1970.
1970. Well, I mean, we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit back here, but I'm going to try and keep you informed as to what's going on in the world of cycling and what's going on in the world of Italy in the 1970s. So obviously not much happens in anybody's life between the ages of 0 and 10. But at this time, cycling is dominated by Belgian guy Eddy Merckx, greatest of all time. He's also dominating the Giro d'Italia, riding for an Italian team. So cycling is in a state of kind of questioning itself in Italy because nobody can beat this guy. And as I said, the kind of economic miracle is also in evidence on the Adriatic coast there with the growth of tourism, which is where Pantani's mother makes her living. But you get this influx of like West Germans every year as well. It's a strange place to grow up. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about cycling in the 1980s, and we're going to talk about it with these 4 characters. So on the top left there, the kindly grandfather-looking figure is a man called Francesco Conconi, who was the head coach for the Italian cycling organization throughout most of the 70s and 80s. Sorry, most of the 80s, I would say. He's a sports scientist who develops all these techniques for measuring output from cyclists and where their limits lie, basically, in terms of bike racing. And he does look like a friendly old grandfather guy, doesn't he?
He really does.
He does. Tell me he wasn't.
Well, yeah. He pioneered this method of maximizing athletic performance by taking a liter of blood out at the top of your form and freezing it, and then putting it back in when you needed it, which is pretty grim. Lovely stuff. Top right there is a guy called Beppe Cerrone. Hi everybody, Philip here from the future. That's not Giuseppe Cerrone, that's Francesco Moser, who of course won the World Hour record in 1984 using Conconi's autologous blood transfusion method, the kind of poster boy for that new style of brute force cycling. Sorry about that. Enjoy the rest of the episode. So this is like a new way of winning races, is you don't have to be a great climber anymore. You can defend in the mountains as long as you don't lose like oodles of time, and you can win it back in the time trials because bigger guys have bigger muscles and can ride faster on the flat. So this is a new way of winning, and these guys, the Conconi method of training is set around maximizing that power, that steady state power output. So you don't need to be excellent in the mountains anymore. You can be competent. Below him is a gentleman who looks like a James Bond villain with a penchant for cardigans. This is Michele Ferrari, who is he's like the devil of professional cycling to this day. He's a doctor who trains with Conconi at the University of Ferrara, and so he's basically been at the heart of almost every doping scandal in cycling for about 25 years because he just does not learn. He's just a bad guy.
Nothing about
this picture surprises. Well, nothing I see in this picture surprises me when you say that. You know, there is a kind of there's a kind of diabolical quality to him in this picture. I'm not. Yeah,
and he does not give a fuck. And you'll see later on. There's some wonderful quotes from him later on. He just wants to see what. Basically, I think he views cyclists as like lab rats, and he just wants to see what they can do. Next to him,
just complete psychopath.
Yeah, pretty much. Next to him, there is some syringes of a substance called synthetic EPO, or I'm not even going to try and pronounce what that is, but you guys can, listeners can look that up if they want. This is a hormone produced in the body, which will go into its effects on the next slide. But this exponentially increases athletic output by increasing your red blood cell count.
Okay, I'm gonna look just to.
No. We're gonna get into that.
Okay.
So we'll go a bit deeper on that later on. And then next to that is Gianni Bugno, who is the kind of first test case of Mr. Ferrari's methods. Like you can see he's a bigger dude than Marco Pantani, but he wins the Giro. And he starts getting results in multi-stage races by not being that great a climber, but being great at time trialing. He's one of Ferrari's clients there as well. The next slide is a kind of a brief explanation of what EPO does. So your body produces EPO naturally. Yeah, it's a hormone that leads to the production of red blood cells, which is its primary function there. But it also gives protective elements in the brain, the white fat cells, in the muscles, and in the heart. And it also, red blood cells increase what your body uses to carry oxygen to your muscles. So you can see why this would be useful in athletics.
Yeah.
So this leads to an era of like big guys winning Grand Tours. So a guy like Coppi, who was a very small, very skinny guy, but not great on the flat, gave way to, next slide, people like Miguel Indurain, who dominated cycling in the first half of the 90s. A big guy, like 190 centimeters tall, that's about 6'3". And he, not a great climber, but could get through it. Wasn't going to win many stages in the mountains, but on the time trial and the flat, he was an absolute monster. Seen here taking the world hour record on a cool futuristic bike, which is basically a lot of these slides, Paul, are just going to be excuses for me to show you cool bikes from the 1990s.
Do you know what that reminds me of? Do you remember those
cool futuristic bikes that people used to have in the 80s called like the Lynx, and it had like a soundboard on it, like a light soundboard on it. And like, if you ever got to borrow, I never had one. If I ever got to borrow like one of my friends' Lynxes and I'd ride it around, I genuinely felt like I was driving a spaceship. That's what that kind of, that's what that image kind of
it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I mean, they banned those after a while, which is a crying shame. So we'll talk a little bit now about the junior and amateur career of Mr. Marco Pantani. Next slide, please. Remember when I said he was a balding weirdo with sticking out ears?
Yes, I remember.
Very well. Sorry, I just saw the picture.
You see that?
As you said that.
The kid on the left here is that's the last year of his amateur career. So, but we're going to talk a little bit. So, as a junior, the thing about Marco Pantani is he never won many races, right? As a professional, he only won 26 races in his whole career, which is like a bad year for Eddie Merckx.
Okay.
So, and as a junior, he didn't win many races either, but he always won the hardest races, the ones with the biggest mountains as well. But he also crashed a shitload. He fell off his bike lots, and he crashed his car lots. And he's like an impulsive, balding weirdo with sticking out ears. That's basically. So that's going to take us up to the end of the 1980s. So
with hair is kind of
the picture on the left with the his last year as a junior.
Yeah,
there's a very kind. He has a kind of like
an amateur, yeah, but
as an amateur, sorry.
He has a kind of like a kind of balding elf quality to him.
He does, and it's I always ask myself, would he have been the star he was if he hadn't gone full bald? And the answer is no fucking way, not a chance.
Definitely not.
He looks like the bass player from a really shit prog band.
I was literally just going to say prog, and you beat me to it. Yeah, mate. Yeah, he could have like a touring bass player for a crap version of Genesis with one original member.
Yeah,
they really embrace the thin and hair in prog more than any other genre. Like they lean into when the hair's going, they'll grow it out.
Do. Yeah.
Bald on top, ponytail in the back is a very prog.
But not also that. I'm now thinking of Francis Rossi from Status Quo.
Strong look.
Made a career out of that look over about 20 years.
Yeah.
We digress. We digress.
I like digressions.
Okay.
So that look combined with
too big white shirt.
A white shirt that's clearly too big.
Yeah.
Stonewashed jeans and a waistcoat.
Acid wash jeans. Let's go all the way.
Acid wash jeans and a waistcoat, probably with like the Doc Marten shoe. Strong look.
What if we could go back 3 slides for me to the one with all the different guys on it? Okay. What if you could combine it with Michele Ferrari's cardigan there, like waistcoat cardigan kind of model there?
Yeah, that's a
powerful look.
That's what we're talking about. So let's pick it up again in 1990. We're going to pick it up again. So
great year.
People are starting to notice something's happening in cycling, right? There's a guy called Lucho Herrera who's like kind of proto Pantani. He was a Colombian guy, and he said when I started to see guys with fat asses climbing mountains like aeroplanes, I knew there was something happening. And yeah, it's undeniable. You're seeing bigger guys climbing mountains like smaller guys now, So you also have this thing. So as I told you, like the artificial EPO boosts your red blood cell count, right? Which makes your blood thicker as well. Which means as your heart rate falls down, for instance, when you're asleep, it can't push the blood around your body anymore, and you get a blood clot and you die. So there's a Dutch rider, like not a famous Dutch rider, a guy called Johannes Dreyer in 1990. They find him dead in his hotel room, and that's basically what's happened to him. So you're starting to see guys are like setting their heart rate monitor. So when it gets down to a certain level, an alarm goes off, and they wake up and they ride a bike in the room, like on a trainer, to basically stay alive. So you spend all day riding, and then you get up in the middle of the night to ride, so you don't die.
Yeah. Horrifying existence.
I know. Wouldn't you just go and get a different job?
Yeah. Literally any other job.
Yeah.
Any other job. Any other job that
where I didn't have to exercise lest I die from a blood clot.
Yeah. You're also seeing like so. Okay, so the other societal change you're starting to see is you see like from around 1989 to 1992, you're starting to see like Eastern Europeans and Russians coming into the big European races with perestroika and glasnost and the fall of the Berlin Wall, bringing with them all the wonderful doping practices of the Stasi and of the Soviet Union.
I wasn't going to say anything.
Needless to say, we're combining two worlds of doping here, and this is one of the things I love about cycling as a sport. Is it is a dirty, cheap ass fucking sport. It's like so. In some ways, they always find really advanced ways to cheat, but the infrastructure and the care for people around the sport is absolutely amateur as fuck. It's really quite entertaining is maybe the wrong word. Sometimes entertaining, sometimes horrifying comparison. Yeah. So Pantani's last race as an amateur is the amateur version of the Giro d'Italia.
right.
which he wins, in fact, and that's the kind of the stepping stone for him to sign a professional contract, which is with the team called Carrera. So if you look at the two other pictures on that slide there, you see there in the middle his first jersey in 1992 with Carrera. And I'm not sure you can see it so well on the one on the right there, but Carrera make jeans, yeah?
Yes.
So if you look at the shorts there, look at the shorts on the picture on the right. And they're basically printed like denim. They had pockets on the back, like printed on the Lycra.
Oh, so like kind of like that weird
USA 94.
Yeah.
So of denim going through it.
Exactly. Yeah. It was kind of engineered to look like that. It's pretty cool.
The piping on the shirt
from 92, where he's eating the nectarine, I think that looks slightly denimish as well. I think they kind of
it does. It's like dungarees.
Yeah.
In fact, you had a team at the time that was sponsored by a French like DIY store called what the fuck was it called? Big Mat, and their jersey was actually made to look like an apron that a workman would wear behind a counter in a hardware store. You know, that was
I wouldn't like wearing that one.
No,
I wouldn't like wearing that one.
That was bad news all the way down. So 1992. He turns professional with Carrera the second half of the season. Doesn't really do a lot. He meets a guy called Roberto Pregnolato, who will become his personal physiotherapist and confidant and potentially supplier of illegal substances. And he says to his parents, he says, "I'm going to do this for 2 years, and if I don't get any results, I'm just going to quit and do something else." Which is, admirable hubris. In his contract negotiations, he asks, as a 23-year-old in his first contract with a minimum wage, he asks what his bonus is if he wins the Giro d'Italia. Which is strong.
Yeah. And did he get an answer?
They wrote an obscene number on a piece of paper for him. Yeah. And and basically laughed in his face. So, 1993.
I've got a feeling that might be Chekhov's gun.
Well, we'll get there. 1993, he makes his Giro d'Italia debut. Miguel Indurain, the big guy from Spain on the futuristic bike. Not that futuristic bike, but he wins the Giro d'Italia. Marco's working for his team leader to help him get a good finish. A guy called Claudio Chiappucci, who had the fantastic nickname of Il Diablo.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, a pretty cool nickname. And he, in 1992, he won this legendary stage of the Tour de France where he basically rode by himself over 3 mountains for about 100 kilometers to win alone by 5 minutes. But this guy was this is where cycling starts to look like the WWF. It's just insane stuff that isn't possible. But Marco stops. Sorry? Yeah, I wonder why. Yeah. Well, we'll get to Mr. We'll find out some more interesting things about Mr. Chiappucci later on. But Marco stops on stage 18 out of 21 with muscle problems, tendonitis, I think it was. But an honourable debut for the young man, and then his team almost destroy his career. So he has a slight imbalance in his gait, a slight rotation in his pelvis, and they try to fix it with these plates in his shoes, and it fucks his musculature, it fucks his hips completely, and he can hardly train. He can't keep up with the demands of a professional cyclist because his body is misaligned, and they think they're gonna cancel his contract because he can't deal with the demands of professional cycling. It's an easy fix in the end. Pregnolato, his physiotherapist, realizes the problem and addresses it. But this is kind of an early setback for him. So now we're going to go to 1994. So 1994, before the Giro, there's a very famous result in cycling from a team called Ballad, a Swiss team. And in one of the hardest races in the spring, their riders finish first, second, and third. Can you guess who their team doctor is?
Oh,
let me see. I can't remember his name.
But you remember his cardigan, don't you? It's Michele Ferrari.
Yes. So the team doctor was the Bond villain, the satanic Bond villain.
Yeah,
Spectre. There we go. He was Spectre.
And then this is how little of a fuck he gives. Right, a journalist asks him after this 1, 2, 3, like, you know, we hear like your riders are treated with this EPO, which is completely undetectable in drug tests, by the way. It's like, is this not dangerous for their health? And his quote is, EPO is not dangerous. It's the abuse that's dangerous. It's also dangerous to drink 10 litres of orange juice.
Wow.
Probably not as dangerous,
though. Yeah, like, it's dangerous to
drink 10 litres. It's dangerous to drink. You might shit yourself to death, but...
You're probably not going to have to wake up you're not going to have to wake up in the middle of the night to exercise. No. You might have to wake up in the middle of the night for something else. But yes,
many times, but like not so your heart will. You won't die from a blood clot.
No, you won't.
Okay,
you might.
Okay,
you might shit yourself to death. However,
so
this gets him fired. Like this is a public statement too far. It gets him fired from his job, but this just makes the guy's reputation, right? So now on, everybody in cycling knows if you want to cheat with the synthetic EPO, call this guy.
Yeah, cheat with the best.
Yeah, and this, so from then on, he becomes a shadowy figure in the background of professional cycling, the invisible hand. So,
at this point, he becomes kind of like the spider in the kind of along came a spider cliche.
Exactly. He's a bad dude.
Yeah.
So next slide, please. You can see the denim shorts here much better. And the cool Brico bug-eye sunglasses and the slightly balding look of Mr. Pantani. So this is still sorry?
Pretty intense, and you can really see
how skinny he is.
And how tiny and wee.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. You see some awesome like baggy Italian jumpers and a lovely fade on the guy on the left here on his haircut. It's
that is a nice fade.
It is pretty cool.
That kind of, and it was a very, very Italian look in the 90s. That baggy jumper with jeans.
Yeah. So 1994, he has his second go at the Giro d'Italia, and he wins 2 mountain stages in 2 days. That's his first win as a professional and his second win as a professional in 2 days. And the second day is like what we call in cycling the Queen stage. So this is like the hardest stage of the Giro d'Italia, and he attacks with about 40 kilometers to go on a climb called the Mortirolo, which is a renowned mythical climb of Giro d'Italia history, and he wins the stage at Aprica, which is a ski village, and takes second place in the Giro overall. So he finishes ahead of Lingerain, your big Spaniard, who won the last 2 Giro d'Italias, and he finishes behind a Russian guy called Evgeny Berzin, who's like, he's not a cool dude.
Okay.
So he also goes to the Tour de France in 1994 for the first time. He finishes 3rd overall in the Tour de France on his first participation as a second-year professional, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, all of a sudden
that was the people handling the money, and his team, who'd wrote that ridiculous figure.
You'd be starting to get a bit itchy, wouldn't you?
I'd be starting to sweat.
It's over whether I was going to keep my job for very long. I was the guy who kind of joked, look at this number I'm writing here. Not bad. And then all of a sudden you're like, I might be in shit here.
Anyway, so that's 1995. Because he only really ever races like hard in 2 races. He does the Giro and he does the Tour. And that's his career.
Okay.
Which is pretty... Anyway, Carrera, his team, are going to get a break at the end of 1995. And, well, in fact, the early part of 1995. So he didn't fall very often, Pantani, but when he did, it fucked him up. He always hurt himself. So he gets hit by a car on a training ride in early 1995, and by a local guy, a guy who recognises him as soon as he's hit him, and and he misses the Giro d'Italia with like kind of superficial injuries.
That's not much comfort, is it? Oh well, no. At least he recognised me.
No, but the guy was like absolutely horrified. Apparently, he thought like an angry mob were going to kill him.
Okay, didn't ask for an autograph or anything. Can we have a picture while you're lying there while we're waiting for the ambulance?
Yeah. So he gets back in time to go to the Tour de France, and he actually wins 2 stages. Next slide, please.
Okay.
Here we see Marco Pantani on Alpe d'Huez, which is the kind of iconic climb of the Tour de France. There's the first mountaintop finish of the Tour de France was in 1953 at Alpe d'Huez and was won by Fausto Coppi.
Oh,
there you go.
All right.
So there is Marco Pantani on his way to winning at Alpe d'Huez. You can see the hair is now gone.
Yeah, the hair is now gone.
He's embraced it.
Yeah, that young man clapping
on the right. I'm pretty sure I had that same shorts and t-shirt combination in about 1993.
That's a global hypercolor if ever I saw
one. Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, so he wins that stage. He wins another stage in the Alps, but this time he's not fighting for the overall. He finishes 13th, which that's pretty respectable. He also finishes 3rd in the World Championships in Colombia, behind Miguel Indurain and another guy.
Okay.
So the team think he hasn't raced enough in 1995 because he didn't do the Giro. So they send him to an Italian one-day race called Milan-Turin, which goes from the city of Milan to the city of Turin. And on the way into Turin, towards the end of the race, he's not competing for the win. He's off the back with a few other riders. He's just riding to get to the finish. And the police accidentally open the road, and a car coming up the hill, a Fiat Punto, would you believe, hits 3 of them. So
another car.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry? It's 3 of them.
It comes around the corner. They're coming on the wrong side of the road because they're in a bike race and the road is closed. Yeah. The road's supposed to be closed. Like, it's a blind bend. Car comes up the hill around the corner. They're going down the hill, and it's a huge fucking crash. It's enormous. So his bike is like snapped in 2. Worse than that, though, he breaks his leg so badly there's bone poking through the skin in 2 places, and he one leg is always going to be like 2 centimeters shorter than the other leg after this.
Oof.
He's in hospital for 4 weeks. But there's an interesting aside here to the hospital stay, is that during so he contracts anemia after the surgery to brace his leg. He has an external brace on his leg, which you'll see in the next slide.
Just zoom in.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
It's under plastic there because it's he's about to get in the swimming pool for some rehab. But prior to this, so he contracts anemia. First of all, they notice that his what you call hematocrit count, his red blood cell count, is fucking ridiculous. It's like 54% of his blood is red blood cells. So for a normal human being, it's between like 42 and 45%. That's in the first instance. And then, well, not at this point. The doctors are just like, well, that's weird. And then after they set his leg, he contracts anemia, and it plummets to like 30%, which is dangerous, like life-threateningly low. And even with like blood transfusions, it doesn't pick up. And until mysteriously one day it goes back up to like 48%, like overnight. So what's the theory there is, we'll go into it later on as well, but the theory there is that if you abuse synthetic EPO for long enough, your body forgets how to make red blood cells by itself.
Right. Yeah, I'd kind of thought that would have been the case. You know, it would somehow limit your ability to produce red blood cells.
Yeah.
which is, it's kind of predictable.
Yeah, you can predict that. But then mysteriously, it goes back up to like 48% overnight for a few days. So maybe somebody came into the hospital with some of that. So, who knows? Who knows? So yeah, his 1996 is basically just rehab. He grows a cool beard. He can't ride the Giro d'Italia, so instead he goes on TV singing karaoke and records the theme song for the television coverage of the Giro d'Italia, which I would encourage you to look up at your leisure.
That'll be looked up immediately after we
finish this recording. I like pretty much everything about that. Like that's just brilliant. Like there's just
sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just
that's the type of person who has the type of personality which would enable them to do something like that is the type of person I want to be around.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of who the modern kind of mainstream sport equivalent of this would be. Like a guy who's out with a long-term injury, whose career is under threat, who can't bear to be off the stage, so he records the theme song for the World Cup or something.
Yeah,
fucking incredible.
Brilliant, just brilliant.
Yeah. He meets his the woman who will be like his on and off again partner for the rest of his life, basically a Danish woman called Christine Jonsson. He meets her. She's a cage dancer in a local nightclub.
Really? Again.
What else? Yeah, what else?
Again, it fits with the
personality type, doesn't it? It does.
It absolutely does. He also spends the summer of 1996 building a big fucking house, like 10 kilometers away from where he grew up. He has one wing for himself and one wing for his parents, because he's a classic Italian mama's boy. Him and his mother are like that for the rest of their life. Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah, but she despises his girlfriend. Absolutely hates her because she has like weird clothes and a Mohican.
Throwing that detail in there. That's it.
She's a cage dancer in a nightclub.
just like nothing a traditional Italian mother you'd assume would love.
I mean, I've met your mother, and your mother's a lovely lady, but I don't think she'd be thrilled if you brought home a cage dancer from a local nightclub.
With a Mohican. No, I don't think
she would, to be honest. No.
So
just imagine the look on my mum's face.
So late in the summer, Carrera, the jeans company, confirmed that they're withdrawing from sponsoring the cycling team, presumably to avoid paying out Marco Pantani's bonuses in the future. So his contract is now null and void. He needs to find a new sponsor. So this is around the time. This is the kind of first flush of like good quality live Tour de France coverage and Giro d'Italia coverage that you can watch all day. It's not expensive to run a cycling team in this era. Like 5 or 6 million euros a year. That'll get you, all the exposure you can want on it. Your name on a jersey on TV. So he meets a guy called Romano Cenni, who owns a supermarket chain in Emilia Romagna, where Pantani's from, called Mercatone Uno, and that will become Pantani's sponsor for the rest of his days. Image rights are kind of becoming a thing as well now, so you can get external sponsorship contracts in addition to your salary from your team. And like this is going to make Marco Pantani one of the richest guys in Italian sport for the rest of his days. His image rights are absolutely incredible. So his face is on like soap powder, his face is on beer bottles, his face is on posters in the supermarket. He's advertising Citroens. He's a star. He's a fucking star, right?
So right now we're talking height of his power. Absolute.
No. The height of his power is still to come. But he's a guy who looks unique. He's a guy who's like he does weird quotes and things. So it's only like the end of the summer he can actually start back training.
Okay.
And he shows up to like an amateur race through the Dolomites, dressed as a woman. He just shows up with a wig and some pink lycra or something, and nobody recognizes him until he wins. which
yes,
I think is fucking incredible. Sadly, there's no photos of this. Which
I was going to Google
for photos.
Pisses
Okay.
me off no end. There's no photos of this. So yeah, this is the man he is. He's this is why he's a sporting maverick.
Yeah. So So
I'm getting it now. So it's not the height of his power. Obviously, he's he's still coming back from an injury, but he is he's known. This guy is known and kind of known and notorious, I guess, or kind of gaining some notoriety for his his quotes and his actions and his lifestyle.
He's a one-off. Also, at this point, the French develop a test for synthetic EPO.
Oh.
A urine test, in fact. So they get to the point where they want to do like a blind study to see if it works. So they ask like a load of professional cyclists, would you anonymously submit urine so we can make sure our test works? Because you're the people most likely to have a shitload of EPO in your veins.
Yeah.
And every single one of them refuses.
Yeah, of course. Well,
it's just for medical science, but still, like, no.
You don't even want to chance it.
You don't want to chance it. You don't want anywhere near you.
No. So this is like these French studies estimate that synthetic EPO will give you an uplift in athletic performance of 6 or 7%, right? So if you think about like what's 6 or 7, what's 6% of a 10,000 meters race, Keegan?
6% of 10,000 meters is 600 meters, is it?
Yeah. And imagine winning a 10,000 meters race by 600 meters.
That's a long way.
That's a long way. So,
yeah. If I'm on a jog and I look at my watch and it tells me I've got 600 meters to go until the end, I'm gutted. Like I'm genuinely, I'm suffering. Yeah, that's a long way. That's a really long way.
So like this is like what you can expect, like in a comparison with a clean person of equal ability, you'll finish in a 10,000 meters race 600 meters ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a guy called Bjarne Riis, a Danish guy, wins the Tour de France in 1996. So Bjarne Riis was a fucking bang average professional cyclist for the first half of his career. And then he wins the Tour de France. And his nickname was Mr. 60%, which is a reference to the percentage of red blood cells in his body.
Wow.
And hidden out in the open. So clear.
Yeah, pretty much. Like if you were in the sport, you knew all the shit. Yeah, this is like the WWE thing. It's called kayfabe. Well, we'll get into kayfabe another time. Right. So 1997 dawns, and next slide, please. So this is the new Mecatoni Uno kit that he's wearing, which is, it's no jean shorts, but whatevs. You see there, he's next to two guys. The guy in the red and white spotted jersey there is Richard Virenque, who's a French guy who is also a very good climber. And the guy behind him is Jan Ullrich, who is a young guy, came out of the East German system. Both of these guys will play a role going forward. So that
is your
classic sort of cycling jersey. That's
just like somebody loaded up a load of sponsor logos in a cannon and shot them at the front of that jersey. Yeah,
it's very cool though.
That's how you
very
cool.
Yeah, I just think
you'd see someone who was in an indie band in like 2004
wearing that with like drawing pipes.
Backwards
campus.
Yeah, that's
a cool. I like that.
Lovely like stuff. That. So yeah, he's also riding there. Interestingly, a bike by a company called Bianchi, who were a sponsor to Fausto Coppi of all people. This is like a classic Italian trope. So he's got his little goatee beard now. He starts wearing a bandana, and he gives himself the nickname of Il Pirata, the pirate, which is pretty cool.
Yes.
That's a cool nickname.
Giving yourself a nickname. I think that's it.
That's a kind of signal that the wheels are starting to fall off.
Yeah, maybe. Who can say?
Consistent people call you that is
when the wheels have definitely started to fall off.
So his team here is he's got 10 of the same riders who were with him at Carrera. He's got a couple of the same like team managers around him. But the environment is built around him basically. Yeah, he's the main guy in this team now. There's also an interesting thing. I was telling you about Bjarne Riis being Mr. 60%.
Yes.
So the UCI, the people who run cycling, they introduced this doping test where if your red blood cell count is above 50%, you got to take 2 weeks off. It's called a health check. It's not an anti-doping thing because they can't prove that you're using it, but it's a fair sign that you're altering your blood values artificially. This will definitely not come back in the future. Forget that piece of information. You're never going to hear it again.
It is forgotten. I don't even know what you're talking about.
Who knew? So he comes back to the Giro in 1997, right? And in the first week of the Giro, which is normally like a phony war for the guys who are actually trying to win the thing, he crashes and he injures the leg that he injured at the end of 1995. Would you like to guess how that, knowing what you know about Marco Pantani's penchant for ironic and ridiculous things, would you like to guess what he fell over on his bike? What he hit to crash?
Ooh. I mean, please tell me it's like a horse and car.
It was a black cat.
Oh.
Wow, on the nose. On the nose.
Right on the nose, yeah. History doesn't record what happens to the cat. Which is, I shouldn't imagine it was good, though. No. So, he completes that stage, but he's torn a muscle, so he has to stop. Yeah.
Okay.
In the first week. So it's been built up as he's going to be one of the people competing for the Giro d'Italia, and for the third year in a row, he's nowhere near. So he returns to action. This is the rhythm of his year, is the Giro d'Italia and then the Tour de France. So he comes back to the Tour de France, and again he wins at Alpe d'Huez in a time that has never been beaten. Like the time he spent, from the bottom of the mountain to the top was like 37 minutes or something. It's never been beaten to this day. It's
26 years,
still not been touched.
Yeah, exactly. And he wins it. He wins another stage 2 days later in a place called Morzine, which is a lovely little ski village. Jan Ullrich, the young guy from East Germany, he wins the Tour, and everybody thinks, because he's like the ultimate guy from like that era of, he just wins, he dominates the time trials, and he can basically do okay in the mountains. Yeah, so he wins the Tour de France. Pantani's third, and the French guy in that photo, Richard Virenque, he's second. So everybody thinks Jan Ullrich is going to go on and dominate professional cycling on the Tour de France for years, like 5 years or something mad. So this is, everybody's starting to think, maybe is this guy a nearly man? Is this just a guy who can win stages, but like the way cycling is now, because he's always going to lose time in a time trial to these bigger guys, is he just a guy who's going to win stages? So he gets to the Giro d'Italia, where he's expected to win some stages, but not maybe not the overall, as we discussed. People are starting to see him like as a bit of a nearly man, but now, in addition to his shaved head and his little beard, he's got a diamond nose stud and a diamond earring. Because
why not?
Because he's Marco Pantani. That's why. Yeah. So he's So you got a lot of these kind of bigger guys who are dominating the sport, like a Swiss guy called Alex Zuller, Tonkov again, and an Italian guy Ivan Gotti, and Pantani's losing time in the flat stages and the time trials because he doesn't give a shit about them. Doesn't care. He starts chiseling it back in the mountains in the second week, but everybody is pretty sure he's not going to make it before the last week in the Dolomites. he's got 4 minutes to make back on Zuller and Tonkov. So he comes up with a plan in the 17th stage that he's going to attack from the bottom of the Marmolada, which is a very hard climb in the Dolomites. And he asks his teammate, when does it start? And his teammate replies, we're halfway up it.
you think he would have done his homework before, but here we go. He's Pantani.
He's Pantani, and he's impulsive. He's the pirate, you know. So he doesn't win that stage, but he gets second, and he's got enough to kind of get back to like touching distance of the pink jersey, and then he finished. That stage he does take the pink jersey. He kind of just about gets it over. The next mountain stage is like the big one, is what we call the Queen stage, which is Queen stage in cycling is like the hardest stage on a tour. And in this one, he knows he has to take as much time as he can because he needs to pad his lead before a time trial on the last day. So he does this cool thing where he wears his stupid bandana as well. So he lashes the bandana to the floor, he lashes his drinks bottles to the floor, and he lashes his diamond nose stud to the floor, shedding. He claims later on he heard a voice telling him to do this. He makes this absolutely insane attack that nobody can follow. Like a couple of guys try, they manage to hang on to him for like a minute or two, and then he sails over the line in his baggy jersey, in his Jesus Christ pose, as you see on slide 17.
Yeah, great slide. Iconic image.
I would say.
Absolutely.
I would say definitely. If you wanted an image of Pantani, if you were like Pantani's biggest fan, and you wanted a picture of him, like, I don't know, in your bathroom for daily inspiration, I think that would be the iconic.
There's some good ones to come as well, so hold that thought.
I look forward to it.
But he's got a minute and a half going into the final time trial, which he needs to. Nobody expects he's going to carry that across the line.
Just a quick question. So, can you give me a bit of
clarification on the difference between those mountain stages and the time trials, just for the layperson's view?
The layperson. So the idea is in a Grand Tour, you've got like 21 stages. You'll have 2 rest days as well. The idea is to give everybody, all kinds of riders, a chance. But normally the stages that will decide the time differences for the overall will be a time trial, which is you ride on your own against the clock. It's usually about 40 or 50 kilometers. And, you know, that's where the bigger guys can make a difference because they're basically more powerful. Mountains, it's like a normal race where you have everybody starts together, but you'll have one or more big fucking mountains, and then it comes down to a combination of, basically an interplay between power and weight. Basically, who can asphyxiate themselves the slowest.
Oh, sounds marvellous. Marvellous.
It's a great sport.
Those time trial days,
just one more quick question. So on those time trial days, they are the days where they will literally just go flat out 50 kilometers and, you know, just put themselves through whatever they're capable of putting themselves through. And then how long do they have to recover after that? Is the next stage the next day? Usually
it'll be the next day. Like I say, in those 3 weeks, you get 2 rest days, and they'll normally be on a Monday. But yeah, usually you want to put your biggest like spectacle stages, which will normally be the big mountain ones, on the day before, because that's what's going to really fuck everybody. Because a time trial is only going to be it's going to be less than an hour's effort.
Okay. All right, so you've got quite a long.
Yeah, it's an intense effort, but it's a short effort. So yeah, on the last day of the time trial, basically, Tonkov, he bottles it. Yeah, he actually loses time to Marco. So Marco wins the Giro d'Italia. Italy goes crazy. Everybody loves him. And there's one slight fly in his ointment is, I don't know if you remember the 50% health limit we talked about earlier, where only 50% of your blood can be red blood cells. Well, a teammate of his failed that test on the morning of the last stage. So he had to. He didn't finish the Giro. He got sent home sit at home for 2 weeks. And in the shitty standard of journalism that surrounds cycling and almost every other sport, which will become a recurring theme on this show, nobody asks the question, how did this happen? Nobody asks why. They just go, oh, cool little Italian guy won the Tour. Nice one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But, so he gets interviewed on the day after when he's just won the Giro, and they ask him, how are you going to celebrate? And he says, I'm going to go home, lock myself in my bedroom with Christina and a box of Viagra for 10 days.
Okay.
Mr. Pantani. What he actually does is he goes home and climbs out the bathroom window, gets in his car and goes off to go fucking mad for like 5 days.
So a little bit of clarification on go mad. I mean, obviously this guy he's nuts. I mean, he's nuts. Clinically nuts.
So like,
by going mad, do you mean, are we going like on a 5-day bender?
So he shows up again at 10 o'clock the next morning for like a press conference in Cesenatico next to Christine, who deadpanned it. Who wasn't like, where the fuck have you been all night? She deadpanned it. But then, like, every year between the Tour and the Giro and the Tour, sorry, he would have 10 days off. So basically, you got 3 weeks between the Tour, the Giro finishing and the Tour starting, and he basically disappears for those 10 days of those 3 weeks, then goes back to work.
Okay, given the nature of his
demise, I imagine that is, there's a lot of drinking. And a lot of stimulants,
a lot of other stuff. But that's a good question as to because it's a good question as to when that started. And that's one theory, is that he was already enjoying or dabbling in cocaine at that point. But my notes here says 10 days of fucking madness.
Okay.
I just assumed that madness had cocaine involved.
Not admitted and not proven, but yeah. So we're coming up to the Tour de France now. The Tour de France that year starts in Dublin, which is interesting, and that means all the teams have to get on 2 specially chartered ferries with all the cars and everything and all the trucks. 2 specially chartered ferries from Dunkirk. So next slide, please. In an incredibly rare instance of Belgian police doing their fucking job, some chaps from the Belgian border police stop a car from the Festina team, who were one of the biggest teams in the world at the time, driven by a Belgian guy called Willy Voet, and even more out of character for the Belgian police, they decide to search it. And in there, they find like basically a mobile pharmacy, destined for the Tour de France. And Willie originally tries to like brazen it out a bit, but it's clear that he's out of his element after 12 hours in custody. And he says, all this shit is a shitload of EPO, some amphetamines, testosterone, steroids, and a quantity of what's called peau belge on his person, which is a delightful mix designed to keep people driving through the night off amphetamine, caffeine, heroin, cocaine, and whatever else you want to grind in there.
I shouldn't laugh, and I shouldn't be surprised that a cycling team, so drugs by this point is so kind of pervasive that even the team driver is on what is essentially a supercharged speedball.
This is a physiotherapist, like the standard physiotherapist. So
he is on a James Brown quantity of drugs.
But what you got it right. Okay, so what this is right, is this is where cycling starts changing, right? This is where fans start, the lid's off now, yeah? So this is where fans start looking at this and they start talking about who's doping and who's not doping, as opposed to who's winning and who's not winning, right? But the people inside the sport, they haven't caught up to this yet. And they don't understand what's happening. So for them, it's just like, do what you always did, deny, deny, deny. Nothing to do with us. This is just a rogue guy who's got like 10,000 euros worth of drugs in his car. So, okay. Yeah, the race starts like somewhat under a cloud. And given his first 10 days of his holiday, you won't be surprised to hear that in the first very short time trial, which was about 10 kilometers long, Pantani finishes 181st out of 189 guys. He's already given up 4 minutes to Jan Ullrich, who won the Tour the last year.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So, you know, he's been on a, you know, a 10-day. Let's make
no bones about it. Yeah.
A semi-safe assumption that, you know, he's been doing a lot of drugs in this or at least some drugs in this 10-day hiatus. Now, who are the 8 riders who finished behind him on that first time trial?
I would love to know.
Were they just, you know, were they just amateurs who, you know, came up with the registration fee?
I think probably some guys whose job is sprinting for the stage the next day or whatever. But I imagine Mario Cipollini was one of them. But we'll introduce Mario Cipollini another time. He's on the list. So he's telling the press he's just there to win stages. I mean, like, Ullrich loses. Sorry, Pantani keeps losing time to Ullrich and the rest of the guys through the Pyrenees, which is the first mountains, and we get to the we'll go through the more of the fallout of the Festina affair first. So sorry, the drugs bust becomes known as the Festina affair, and Festina are forced to quit the Tour de France with Virenque, one of the favourites, and there's a couple of other teams get thrown out when the French police, like smelling blood, start raiding hotels and searching through bins and stuff. So next slide, please. The riders kind of go on strike on one stage. And they all stop the bike after 10 kilometers. They sit down on the tarmac and they say, "This is it. Tour de France finishes here, unless you can guarantee there's no more police raids." Marco is one of the ringleaders of this for some weird, unknown reason. There's also a really cool piece of cycling history on the left of these 4-spoked spinergy wheels. I love these.
Ooh, damn.
Yeah, pretty sweet. So in the end, like the organizer, Jean-Marie Leblanc, he makes certain promises to the leaders of the riders, and they agree to carry on the race. These are lies. These are just lies. The raids continue, and all the Spanish teams withdraw en masse, and it's a much reduced field going into the third week. So Pantani is at this point 9 minutes down on Jan Ullrich going into the first stage in the Alps, where it absolutely pisses it down, right? Next slide. And about halfway up the Col de Galibier, which is a 18-kilometer long climb, he just jumps out of the field and proceeds to absolutely destroy everybody, right? He finishes this stage. He's done it with about, 30-10, about 50 kilometers to go. And he's alone from this point until the finish line, and he puts 9 minutes into Ullrich. He takes the yellow jersey on this stage, and he wins like one of the ultimate cycling stages. It's incredible. From that, he just consolidates. He doesn't need to attack anymore. He lets Jan Ullrich win a stage at one point, but he's only the 7th rider in history to win the Giro and the Tour in the same year. The last one being our old friend Miguel Indurain.
Okay, so I mean, this is.
Have there been any since? Is this like an?
No, it's never been done since.
Heard of?
He's the last one to do it, and only 7 people in history have done it. this is like one of the most successful cycling seasons of all time, and he's credited with like saving the Tour de France. Yeah, because he's a guy who's not been involved in these scandals. His team has kind of sailed between the cracks there, and he's, well, you can imagine how famous he is in Italy now, right?
So this kind of cements
this sort of mythical status, but also it's even more kind of made even more kind of special or significant because it would have
ordinarily have been a
disaster for the Tour with all these drug scandals. He kind of pulls it out of the mire by doing something.
Honestly, like the race was within 5 minutes. Yeah, the race was within 5 minutes of stopping and not starting again. It was like that. So yeah, in his mind, he's saved the Tour de France, and a lot of people's eyes, he's saved the Tour de France. Romano Prodi, who's just become the Prime Minister of Italy, there's a big televised phone call with him because he's taken the leaf out of Silvio Berlusconi's book of like, because Berlusconi had the AC Milan, hey, which is like ironic because Marco's an AC Milan fan. So after this, he realizes like the amount of money that's like pouring into him with sponsorships and endorsements and everything. He needs a manager to like to do all this stuff for him because his phone just doesn't stop ringing. So he hires this woman who works with, remember Max Biaggi, the motorbike guy?
Yes.
Yeah. He hires a woman called Manuela Ronchi, who's his manager, and he's, this makes him even richer than he was before. It's, just as an example, like when he died, he had 20 million euros just in his current account. And he spent a lot of money, but he was quite sensible with it as well. He was buying houses all over the place. So every year he's making a couple of million euros on rents. So just to add to all his flaws, he's a fucking landlord as well.
I liked him until that last sentence. So.
Yeah. He doesn't look like the kind of guy who'll fix your boiler either, does he?
No. He looks like the kind of guy
who would just stare at you in silence when you asked about the boiler.
Yeah. And then
until you just kind of walked off.
And then evict you.
Yeah.
So there's a third Grand Tour every year in Spain in September. It's the Vuelta a España. And all the guys who got thrown out of the Tour de France go there. So it's like a really good field. And there's this guy who's just come back from a life-threatening cancer called Lance Armstrong, who finishes fourth. But that's obviously you'll never hear of him again. That's not...
I was wondering when he would show up.
Well, this is what's called foreshadowing. It's a literary device we employ to enhance the narrative. So, 1999. This is where this story stops being about cycling, right? Until now, this has been a list of like cycling accomplishments. Now it gets interesting. An hour in. So he goes to the Giro and he dominates it, right? Absolutely dominates it. He wins 4 stages. He's not taking any shit from anyone. He's just, every time he can win, he's winning. So he's pissing people off as well because, a lot of teams depend on a stage win in the Giro. That's your contract for the next year. And he doesn't need to win these. It's just total dominance. There's a stage where his chain comes off his bike at the bottom of a mountain. And he spends 30 seconds putting it back on as all the favourites like ride away. Then he stops again to change his bike. And then he goes past them all and wins. It's, yeah. So there's one mountain stage left and the Giro starts that morning in a little ski town. Next slide, please. Called Madonna de Campiglio.
Look at that.
That is pretty nice, eh?
That is stunning.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So, drug testers from the UCI, who are like the FIFA of cycling, show up at his hotel at like 8 o'clock in the morning, take a blood test from him, and they test it and they realize it's got 52% of red blood cells in it. Oops. So they somewhat shit it, and they test it again like 4 times, and they realize, this is definitely over the limit. So the day of the last hard stage, the Giro d'Italia throws out the leader of the Giro d'Italia, who is Marco Pantani.
That is, I mean, that's quite the scandal.
Just before we get back into the story, can just a quick question.
Yeah.
So when you say he's just dominating, he's winning stages, he's just blowing everybody else away. He's stopping to change his bike, stopping to change his chain, and still going on and winning these stages.
Is there a sort of average, say, like a very good
performance in which in which a cyclist would win one of these Grand Tours? Is there a sort of average, like how many stages would you expect to be winning if you were going to win a tour?
So there's guys who've won no stages and won a Grand Tour. There's a couple of those. Yeah.
Okay.
There's guys who've won. I mean, there's a Belgian guy who won 13 stages in the Vuelta one year and didn't win. So average like 2 or 3 maybe. Yeah. I mean, there's other ones. There's other ones that, normally the stages that you can win, but you're always going to need favors down the road more than you need that extra win, So people there's some horse trading in this as well. Like I said, cycling is a disgusting, dirty sport.
Because from a kind of, like I say, from a layman's point of view, you just kind of expect whatever you're going to win the tour.
You just dominate. You want to dominate, yeah. But this is like, I mean, you see this with Armstrong after his comeback as well, and everybody's just like, why do you need to do this? And it just sets him up for a fall. So anyway, he's expelled from the race, and he's forced to take a 2-week sit down. Right. So this isn't a doping conviction though. This is a health check. Yeah.
They said it was
a health check, break.
Yeah, exactly. So he can just take it on the chin, right? He can just sit on his ass and he can say like, all right, no problem. But this is a guy who's bought into the whole hype around himself as being like the savior of Italian cycling, the guy who saved the Tour de France. And he's always been awkward with people looking at him, which is all his mystical pronouncements and everything. But now he's starting to get paranoid about it, right? And he can't bear the thought of people talking about him behind his back. And there's all these conspiracy theories start springing up around him. Like some people saying like the mafia did it to like not make a loss on all the books they're running on the Giro d'Italia. His manager Ronchi says she saw the team doctor in a nightclub at 3 a.m. in the little ski town where the stage was. And I mean, none of these really hold any water because we all know what cycling was like in those days. He's just fucked it up. He's fucked up topping himself up at some point in the last few days. So, but this also gives him that kind of feeling that he's the only person being punished for a sport that's like rotten to the core. Yeah. And he feels like they've singled him out as like the tall poppy,
Yeah. That's kind of he's the superstar. It's a big scalp.
Yeah. And then in June, Michele Ferrari, our devil in a cardigan.
I was wondering when he'd show up again.
Dr. Ferrari.
His offices are raided, and they take away his computers, and he's charged with doping cyclists. Okay. So, again, people want to know what's gone on with Marco's health check as well. And later in June, the Italian Olympic Authority set up an investigation into what's happened there. The team doctor's like, I don't know, I don't remember. All the questions are just, no clue, whatever. Normal things, everything's normal. And the team manager just flat out insults the people asking the questions. And in the report of the 23rd of June, because this is a guy who's already got problems with people like looking negatively at him and hates the idea of people talking about him behind his back. And the Italian Olympic Authority released a report that says they have serious doubts and confusion around the legality of the athlete's behavior and his integrity as a sportsman. in that he's provided no serious explanation of the causes of the sudden hematocrit increase and has therefore not cooperated as he should have done in the quest for the truth. Now, they still can't prove that he's taken EPO because there's no test for it. So,
for somebody who's that sort of seemingly, he strikes me as quite narcissistic, obviously, and may or may not be habitually using a substance that makes you paranoid.
well, right, okay. So, this is the point where it's on note that he's started taking cocaine, and he tells people that, remember that Italian concept of like looking for the truth behind the perceived reality. Yeah, so according to the way he tells it, like one of his mates at this point was like, hey, you want to try some of this cocaine? That'll really help you like see clearly what the truth is, because the best thing to give somebody who's paranoid, depressed, and believes there's a conspiracy against them, cocaine.
It's like, it is like, that is the first thing the doctor would recommend. You're feeling paranoid, you're feeling a bit anxious, have a strike.
Especially as you've been a habitual drug user for your job for like a decade now.
You have some issues with dependence as well. Yeah. Fantastic.
No worries, mate. Get on it.
No, get on that.
Yeah. So he tells, So at some point, right, he's got to choose, because he's going out like every night at this point, and this is where he tells Christine that he started with cocaine around this point. So at some point, it's come down to a choice for him, because he can come back to riding anytime he wants, yeah. And at some point, he has to make a decision between the Tour de France and cocaine, and he's like, "You know what? Cocaine, baby." He doesn't.
I thought you were going to say the Tour. You were going to say the Tour.
Absolutely not. Doesn't race again. Doesn't race again in 1999. Can't face the shame. But anyway, luckily, like Lance Armstrong comes along in 1999 to win the Tour de France and show everybody what clean cycling looks like. So, few problem solved. End of podcast.
Thanks, lads.
Yeah, brilliant. Oh, no, wait,
cheers,
sorry, I've got that wrong.
Hang on.
I've got that wrong. During the Tour de France, a prosecutor in Turin starts looking into his medical records from that crash he had back in 1995 and digs out the anemia thing and finds out that his at one point his red blood cell count was as high as 60%. And he's like, shit. So in 6 months, like, everything's starting to turn to shit, right? Yeah. Everything. So I'm going to try and get through before our 40 minutes is up, because I've got less than 10 minutes of it left now. I'm going to try and get through try the rest of 1999, and then we'll pick it up for the last 4 years in one fell swoop. So anyway, okay. Right? November, he tells his manager that he's a cocaine addict, right?
Okay.
And she says, and I quote, "I never again asked for money from Marco, because the relationship of a manager with an athlete is a percentage of what you make them earn. But with Marco, I wasn't only a manager, because in the team I was an administrator. So I was there in the first person. I was the team manager. I was Marco's manager. And I was the head of communication in the press office. So I had 4 roles. But I never took money from any of these. I went 4 times a week to Cesenatico. What could I do? Ask for petrol money at the end of the month? How could I have been credible and helped him if I'd have made it a question of money? In the end, I said, a friend doesn't do it for money." Now, this is a huge fucking big ethical red flag, right?
Yeah.
You know your client is addicted to a drug that is both illegal in the sport he practices and in society at whole, right?
Yes.
And you didn't bring it up with the people who are paying the bills, right? And if she did make it aware of them, they'd be funding a fraud. And if she didn't, like, you're putting a guy back who's clearly in no condition to go back on a bike. You're putting him back on a bike at every opportunity because all these people's livelihoods depend on him. Yeah.
Yes.
That's friendship, Keegan. That's friendship.
Yeah, that's friendship. That's friendship.
Yeah. What a human being. What a human being. What a humanitarian. What a humanitarian.
Yeah. Anyway, in December, right? In December, an Italian newspaper, La Repubblica, publishes the results of a police raid on kindly old man Francesco Conconi's officers, mentor of Michele Ferrari. Next slide, please. And two files, two fucking old school, crappy, your dad using a computer files in a WKS database and the Microsoft Works database on the right there are recovered, giving like blood values for about 70 different professional cyclists across the last 7 years. Marco's name is in it for 3 years, showing all his blood values and how much EPO he was treated with every month for 3 years. I remember his old team leader, Claudio Chiappucci.
Yes.
Right. Now, at one point, he has a red blood cell count of 70%. In 1994, when Marco's working for him, right?
It's like, that's what you'd expect in, I don't know, like a walrus or something, you know?
Yeah, it is. It's a frankly staggering revelation. So, quote briefly from Matt Rendell here to kind of bring this section to a close. This is like when the career of Marco Pantani as a top-level cyclist is in free fall, basically. He'll have a brief hurrah after this, but...
Okay.
Yeah, so no charges have been brought against Marco. There's still room for denial. But the publication of those records presented him with 3 shattering revelations. The first was that his blood values for the first 3 years of his professional career have been recorded. The second one was that those records in every other moment of his professional career were now under scrutiny by the police. The third was that the national press had access to the ongoing investigations. That sensation of being observed was only going to get worse.
Cornered, Marco.
You're cornered, mate.
Yeah. Now, what he could have done here, right, is he could have done what not many people have ever done, and put their hands up and said, yeah. Done it. But this is the sport. This is like the milieu that I work in, you know? This is how it is. Maybe we can change that, because, you know, you're getting a lot of dumb kids with not many options, and you're putting them in a position where they have to choose between the only career they can do successfully and turning their bodies into a chemical stockpile.
Yeah.
Once again, a theory that will become entrenched as we go further through this this episodes of this podcast. Year 2000, after his legal woes begin. So he goes to a training camp at the end of January with the team, south of Spain. Nice little getaway. At the party at the end of it, he pulls out about 60 grams of cocaine in front of his work colleagues.
Okay. That's a lot. So now everybody in the team knows about it, except the people who pay the bills. Yeah. So he's getting quite brazen. He's getting quite reckless, because at the start of March he totals his Ferrari as well. And then end of April he gets charged over the Turin incident, the hospital incident there, for the new crime of sporting fraud. Says he is broken in the head and won't ride the Giro. He, of course, rides the Giro. He's nowhere near the front of the race, but he helps his teammate to victory, including by absolutely destroying all the guys' rivals on one of the big mountain stages. He goes to the Tour de France then for the last time and gets his dick kicked in the first mountain stages. Armstrong absolutely does him over, destroys him. So he knows he's not going to win the Tour de France, but he looks at Armstrong and he can't believe that a guy who's like 25 centimeters taller than him is that much faster than him on a mountain. So he decides to try and make Armstrong lose the Tour de France instead of trying to win it himself. So next slide, please. Okay. You know the Mont Ventoux? Yes.
Yeah.
Only from conversations with you.
Yeah, a very famous mountain in Tour de France history. Tommy Simpson, British guy, died there from amphetamine and alcohol poisoning, and heat stroke. That didn't help. So he has a right old ding dong with Lance Armstrong there. Armstrong gives him the stage at the end, and Pantani decides to very graciously start an argument about it. And Armstrong calls him a shit stirrer. Pantani wins the next stage, but very, very nearly makes Armstrong lose the Tour. Like, that was as hard as Armstrong had to work for most of his Tour de France career that day. And he forgot to eat. And then, yeah. But then Pantani stops. So this isn't a bad sporting performance for a current cocaine addict. A guy who, as you've seen, is not averse to taking 60 grams of cocaine on a work trip.
I'm still a little shocked by that. That's an unbelievably large quantity of drugs to just pull out during a work trip.
Yes, that's like a bag the size of your fist. Yeah, so in August, the Italian Olympic Committee decide that if you want to go to the Olympics, you have to do these blood tests called I Don't Risk My Health. That's the campaign. So without getting into the hematology of it, it ain't good for Marco Pantani, right? There's some serious anomalies there. There's a big fight on whether he goes to Italy, whether he goes to Sydney or not to compete. Eventually, he gets through on a technicality. He goes, he rides around, and he finishes 69th. Nice.
Marvellous. Now, is that he finishes 69th because he gets through on a technicality, so he is his performance just due to not taking care of himself, or do you think his performance would be due to, in order to evade capture, he stopped taking performance?
It's neither of those things. It's not a course that's suited to him, and the only reason he wants to go is because they told him he couldn't go. So
okay,
yeah,
nothing to do with drugs, an excess of narcotics, or a lack of performance-enhancing drugs.
It couldn't have helped, could it? So, yeah. Anyway, November, he's found guilty of sporting fraud over the Turin hospital incident. He goes to a police station to sign some papers for it. Next slide, please. And then drives his car the wrong way up a wrong way street and totals 8 other cars on his way back.
I was not expecting to see a Mercedes on 2, possibly 3 wheels.
Yeah.
In an incredibly narrow street.
Wrong way down a one-way street, smashes up 8 cars. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, I actually see that it's resting up against another car. I thought it was on a wall. Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, he's convicted on a new law. He's given a 6-month suspended prison sentence and a €6,000 fine. Now, being a convicted criminal, obviously ain't going to do much for his fragile mental state and paranoia. So he goes to a press conference at the start of 2001 to launch the team and claims once again he's been singled out. He has a clear conscience. And there's all the other shit you're supposed to say.
Okay. So how are his sponsorships looking at the minute?
Pretty good. All great. Okay. As far as they're concerned. He's won 2 stages at the Tour de France that summer. He's still the most popular athlete in Italy. He's got some mountain legal trouble, but nothing to worry about at this moment in time.
Oh, okay.
So there's a journalist who's present at this press conference who went to school with Pantani. And he says, this persecution hypothesis is answered by the numbers that show soaring red blood cell counts on a number of occasions. And then we need to clarify what Pantani means by a clear conscience. Can your conscience be clearer if you've doped? As for what the verdict means, as the Fawley verdict maintains, it's the verdict in the court, simply because everyone else was doing it. Obviously, it's infuriating to be one of the few in the firing line, especially when it's absolutely plain that Pantani was not the exception in a sport in which many teams were put together on the basis of blood values alone. So people are starting to put this together, right? And as I say, this is like a new era of cycling coverage where all we talk about is doping and not racing. In April of 2001, the UCI, the Kings of Cycling, combine the 50% red blood cell count test with a urine test. So if you flip the 50% limit, you're forced to do a urine test for EPO, which rather begs the question: why not just use the fucking test? Yeah. Because the UCI have no interest in catching cheats at all. They don't care. Why would you want to catch people who are winning races? It's not great for business. Yeah. He spends most of the early season abandoning races. He tries to get an invitation to the Tour de France, and the guy who runs the Tour de France asks a rhetorical question to the press: Marco Pantani, is he still riding? It's this is like all just almost designed to fuck over his mental state, eh?
Mm-hmm. He's becoming quite a kind of toxic personality within the
as I remember it from this point, it was just like, if you ever read his name, it was just like, didn't finish a race. That was all you read about. His manager sees his exclusion from the Tour de France as a catastrophe, and she says cycling was the only therapy that could keep him away from drugs. Like, that's not sustainable, is it?
Well, keep him away from one kind of
drug.
drugs.
Yeah, one drug. Yeah.
Very much immersed in several dozen others.
But you've got a staff of 30 people who are entirely dependent on one guy's athletic performance, who has serious psychological problems and a drug addiction, and you just keep putting him back on a bike.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? Yeah. So on the 27th of May, Stage 8 of the Giro d'Italia pulls into San Remo on the Adriatic coast, and the police raid every single team hotel. This is like one of the rider's dads has his camper van outside the hotel, and it takes the police 3 pages of A4 to type out everything they found in that van. Some riders decide it's easier to jump out the window themselves than to throw the drugs out the window.
This sport is an absolute shit show.
It's amazing, isn't it? So, Marco Pantani and Mario Cipollini, who I cannot state enough, we're going to get to at some point in this series. They try to organise a riders' strike the next morning, right? To try to stop the Giro d'Italia. But the organisers, just like, you're invading my privacy or something, right? So the organisers, they get to Cipollini the night before because he's a bad scab, right? So Marco's trying to lead a strike on his own the next morning with about 4 other guys and looks incredibly stupid. They find a syringe with insulin, traces of insulin in it, which is also banned, in the room that was assigned to him, and he's going to get charged for that later on as well. The only good news for him in 2001 is that the conviction in Turin is overturned, literally only because it wasn't a crime in 1995 to dope in sport.
Well, I mean,
vindication.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a point. You know?
Yeah. Although it's not like he reformed his character once it was.
No. Yeah.
So the 2002, right? The sponsorship contract with Mecatoni Uno is up, and they're like, well, you know, we still love Marco and he's still part of the family, but we can't just keep hosing money at this shit show. This is insane.
He's a mess.
There's a vastly reduced budget for the team. They get rid of the experienced team manager, and Marco's personal manager takes over as team principal. So this is a team who all know he has a drug problem, who are all completely dependent on him for their livelihood. They come up with a quote-unquote innovative management structure, which basically makes inexperience a feature and not a bug. It's all the wrong guys. People are inexperienced in their roles. It's all guys who've worked with Conconi or Ferrari before. The equipment's not great. And to cap it all, Marco started smoking crack.
It's like an exercise in how things can go from bad to worse.
It is. So his personal manager decides.
Marco.
his personal manager, Ronchi, moves him into this out-of-season holiday apartment somewhere in the middle of fucking nowhere. And obviously the isolation just makes him want to smoke more crack. Meantime, his house gets raided by the police, with the house that he shares with his parents and Christina, about the syringe they found in San Remo. Late in January, he's supposed to go to the Italian Cycling Federation to do a physical test for his racing license, but he can't because he's been up for 4 days smoking crack. Standard stuff for a professional athlete, right?
Yeah.
At this point, he feels he has to come clean to Ronchi, his manager, and he says, like, I've got to stop cycling. I can't do this anymore. And I'm on crack, right? So she goes to tell the sponsors, right? Because they're going to need to have him some time away from cycling. And the sponsors' only question is, can he ride the Giro? The answer, of course, next slide, please, is yes. Yes, he could ride the Giro. They just put him on a bike.
It's the immorality.
It's sickening. It's like really like it's the conflict of interest there between like you're trying to do what's right for this guy, but everyone's living is dependent on him. Yeah.
So everyone's living is dependent on him. So it's dependent on him. So it's so that justifies acting with absolutely no compassion towards him.
Yeah, exactly. Or you believe that you're doing him a favor by putting him back on a bike every year. Yeah.
You tell yourself you're doing him a favor by putting him on the back on a bike every year. Whether
exactly.
You or not, or you spin that shit so often that you start to believe it.
Yeah. It's incredible. So anyway, they find this psychologist who specializes in drug addiction, who actually works in the public health authority in Italy and is like the leading guy for drug dependency issues in Italy, Dr. Mario Pisacroia. And they kind of do him in secret consultations with him. And he diagnoses Marco as having a non-specific personality disorder, you don't say, with narcissistic, antisocial and obsessive elements, you don't say. Frequent use of denial and manipulation, once again, you don't say. So he tries to set up like a surveillance network within the team, which is basically like, you keep him away from the people he's not supposed to be going to. But this guy has like $20 million euros in the bank. Like he can go to any of these people and say, hey, just go down the street, collect this package for me, and here's a Rolex. Yeah. It's almost impossible. In one session, Pisacroia tells him, if you take a cane, you'll never again be a champion. And Marco asks, but when I'm not riding, can I still do coke? It's a horrible situation. It's really not nice.
I know this is I don't know why I laugh. Well, I do know why I laugh.
Yeah, because it's laugh or cry at this point, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's such a ridiculous situation for. You're right. It is just laugh or cry.
Yeah.
Poor man.
Yeah. In April, he gets brought in for questioning regarding that insulin syringe in San Remo. Again, deny. My name might have been on the room list, but I didn't sleep in that room. We do it for privacy. La, 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 la. The team alleged that the syringe belonged to a team worker who has diabetes and obviously takes insulin for his diabetes. This is rather blown out the water when the team worker tells the investigation that he takes oral medication. The Italian Olympic Authority recommends a 4-year ban.
Just fill him in before. Let him know. Listen, you're gonna have to bullshit for us.
Yeah. I mean, but the other thing here is like, I will no. I'm gonna save that bit for later on. But so he does ride the Giro, but he abandons whilst he's running 75th. Right. The same day, he gets charged again for the 1999 blood test at the Giro d'Italia. That week at the Giro as well, the team doctor is caught with a shitload of morphine that he stole from a dead patient. It's insane.
I mean, like, it's insane. It's like
it's so, considering it's, it's a professional sport and it's a very high profile sport, and they're essentially, cheating, and it's like a network of drugs and a network of doctors and suppliers. I imagine the lack of organisation and the lack of structure to the cheating itself, considering it's such an integral part of the sport at this moment in time. There is no structure to the cheating. It just seems like everybody has gone completely rogue.
I'll tell you who did bring, this is like the dying throes of an era of amateurish cheating, because fucking Lance Armstrong perfected that shit.
Lance Armstrong, the Bruce Lee of cheating.
Yeah, he was amazing, especially for he was so much better at the Omerta side of things than the Italians. It's incredible. So,
absolutely. And not only did he do that, but also on top of it, he also kind of made the world kind of fall in love with him, and kind of, while he's doing this, on one hand,
Cancer Jesus,
Cancer Jesus, and on the other hand, there's people wearing like yellow bracelets and talking about what an inspiration he is.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
Lance Armstrong's on the list for a future episode as well.
Oh, absolutely. What he pulled off.
Yeah. Anyway, so Pisa Croyer, who's Marco's personal psychologist, says, "My advice was that it was a mistake to insist on keeping Marco on a bike. Yeah. The measures taken to give him even the smallest competitive chance were so complex, he was almost impossible to manage. The team was tightly structured around him, yet he constantly reached outside. He maintained his own private cocaine suppliers and probably his own suppliers of doping products. They may have even been the same people, very likely involved in organized crime. You couldn't take his eyes off him for a moment. At the same time, Marco was no longer sure he wanted to continue as a cyclist. If you remove the question of riding, and Marco was extremely wealthy, he didn't need to ride, you were left with just a cocaine problem. And that alone might have been manageable." So in June of that year, after the Giro, he gets an 8-month ban for the syringe. So he can't ride again until 2003 anyway. So he can't take the shame of this. He's too proud to ask for help from anybody. So all he does is he locks himself behind the security door in his house and takes a fuck ton of cocaine. Ronchi responds by sacking Pisa Croyer as Marco's personal psychiatrist. My notes for the rest of 2002 read simply: more car crashes, more coke.
I mean, bang on brand, but is just, that was obviously what he was going to do.
Yeah. He said, so 2003, he said basically, "I've retired from cycling. I don't want to do it anymore. The team's going to stop." But more issues are like, once people keep finding him in the throes of like cocaine psychosis, like psychotic hallucinations, delusional ramblings, writing on bed sheets all over the place. He goes to Cuba. Now this is a fucking wild tale, right? He goes to Cuba for a holiday with a local restaurateur just to get him away from all the people who were surrounding him, right? So there's a load of Cuban girls. There's some extremely lurid and unverifiable claims of a dead prostitute from an ecstasy overdose that I keep reading about, but nobody's proven. He destroys his passport, so he needs to get a temporary document from the embassy to get home. He has plastic surgery in Cuba to pin his ears back, which just makes him look like a kind of parody of himself. The weirdest part of this is Diego Maradona is at the time in a treatment facility in Cuba, right? And he manages to get Maradona to come to the gate to talk to him by phoning up an ex-teammate of Maradona. Maradona doesn't have a fucking clue who this guy is.
Yeah. Lost as much.
Yeah. It's just like two little cocaine-addled weirdos like game recognized game for a brief 5-minute chat. And so on top of this, right, they're still trying to make him race. They're still trying to get him back on a bike. It's incredible. Yeah, it's really remarkable. There's a long quote here from his manager, which I'm not going to read, but it's like, she believes that he's the innocent victim who's trying to save cycling. Marco wants to say to everybody, right, guys, stop, because if we carry on like this, we're going to kill the sport. But he was the only one standing up to the system. he was a victim of the system. Now, okay. There's an issue here, and this is what I wanted to talk about before, of a system fucking over an individual and refusing to address the system. Right?
Mm-hmm.
This is an issue like all throughout sport. Is we like good guys and bad guys. We like to point the finger at some people and celebrate other people, like Armstrong as well. But that doesn't mean that you weren't guilty of stuff. Yeah. It doesn't mean that you didn't cheat, and it doesn't mean you haven't robbed results from other people who maybe were trying to do things the right way. It's I mean, you don't deserve to end up like Pantani did, like paranoid and absolutely fucked up on all sorts of stuff, and psychologically destroyed as a result of bad choices you made in your job. But at the same time, this is a system that's going after one guy to try and show that they have a handle on a problem that they don't have a handle on.
Yeah, and also going after one guy and painting them as the ultimate villain. It deflects from people looking at the system itself.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
System. If you create a villain, then if the system creates a villain, then the system just automatically take the stance of the hero.
Yeah, precisely. And this is like exactly what we learned. Well, the lesson we should take from the Ballad of Marco Pantani is you need to look at a system, and however painful it might be for a year or two, it's a system that needs to be addressed and not just kicking individuals. Anyway, 2004, he moves in with his manager for a brief period, storms out after refusing to go to a treatment facility and arguing with his parents who come to like take him to the treatment facility, runs away to Rimini, which is about 15 kilometers away from his house. You can read all the lurid details of his death, but what does that serve us going into here? He dies on the 14th of January 2004 and immediately becomes a hero of cycling. They have a prize named for him at the Giro d'Italia. If you go to the next slide. Sorry, the next slide is actually the awful hotel where he died in Rimini. But the next slide there is just an enormous monument on the top of one of the
iconic pose.
Yeah, but that's 6 meters tall, that thing.
Oh, there's a person next to it.
For scale, but it's also really gaudy and tacky, isn't it? And you got the last slide is on the Mortirolo, the one on the left, which is like him on a bike looking over his shoulder. On the right is the one in his hometown in Cesenatico. So
that's nice.
That's nice and tasteful, I think. Well, the Spinergy wheels are cool as well. The old school Spinergy wheels, I like those.
That was the first thing I noticed, actually.
Yeah, because you're an aficionado of Spinergy wheels now. But yeah. Again, so just to sum up, what did we learn, Paul? What did we learn?
So, I mean, we looked at someone who, like you said, he made some bad choices and suffered greatly by making bad choices. It was the result of these choices. Was painted as the villain by a system which then
abandoned him.
Just said, abandoned him. But took on the role of the hero in all of this, and so he let himself down, but he was fundamentally let down by a system that should have looked out for him, that should have been there, and should have had an infrastructure in place in which, well, one, doping was.
Yeah, well, you don't have to make a choice. You don't have to make a choice between your career and experimental chemistry.
Yeah, basically a system which allowed these young men to become lab rats.
And the only reason he was singled out as well is, part of his paranoid conspiracy about this was he was singled out because he was winning too much. But I mean, that's partly true. He was singled out because he was winning, so you got tested more. You were more likely to get caught.
He also, by virtue of the statements that he'd make in in his the gold ear stud and the diamond nose stud.
Yeah, some people can't wait to see someone like that fall down.
Yeah, of course, you set yourself up. You set yourself up by acting that way. Obviously, again, his use of drugs probably kind of made him act in a kind of much more unpredictable, extrovert and self-indulgent way, and people come after
people come after characters like that.
Tall poppy syndrome. Yeah.
Tall poppy syndrome. I've never heard that before, but that's a name.
Really? Okay.
No, it's a great one.
You know, the other thing I would say is that he was an inspiration to a lot of people. He's a lot of people's favorite rider still. You know, to watch him was incredible. Like almost literally the literal definition of incredible. You know,
he's up against these people who, you know, are just giants by comparison.
And he looks like a little frail guy, you know,
a little sprightly fella.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the Ballad of Marco Pantani, and that's our first episode of Pirates, Princes, and Peaches. Now, let's decide what the next episode's going to be, Paul. Give me a number between 1 and 100.
Ooh, okay. Let me see. I'm going to go with my wife and my dad's birthdays. In fact, no, I'm not. Today is my brother's birthday, and it's the 20th.
Which one?
I'm going to go.
Which one?
Kevin's birthday.
Happy birthday, Kevin.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. So, I'll go with 28, please.
28. Nah, you can't have 28 because that's another cyclist. So we're not going to do 2 back-to-back cycling episodes. What's your sorry, Kev? What's your second choice?
I'll go with Kevin's age.
Yeah.
49.
49. Is a guy I know almost nothing about, but I remember reading a lot about him in tabloid newspapers. Mr. Danny Cipriani, rugby unionist Danny Cipriani.
Oh yeah. Okay, cool. Excellent.
So, till the next time, have a good one, Paul.
You have a good one too, mate.
All right. Speak to you soon.
Speak soon.
Bye now.